Chapter 5. When, through the agency of Justus, Joseph received an invitation to supper from Demetrius Libanus, he suddenly felt timid. He was bold by nature. When he had been introduced to the high priest, to King Agrippa, to the Roman governor, he had not been embarrassed. But for the comedian he felt a deeper respect. Libanus's acting had carried him away. It had filled him with awed admiration to see a single man, this Jew, Demetrius Libanus, compelling many thousands of people, high and low, Romans and foreigners, to think and feel as he did. Joseph found the actor reclining on a couch in a comfortable green dressing gown. Libanus languidly stretched out his many-ringed hand to his visitor. Joseph saw with embarrassment and surprise how mean of stature this man was who had filled the gigantic Marcellus Theatre. It was a small and select banquet. Young Antonius Marullus, a son of the senator, was there, and also another fledgling aristocrat and a Jewish personage, one of the chief figures in the Velia synagogue, a certain Dr. Licinus, a very affected man to whom Joseph took an immediate dislike. For the first time in a great and fashionable Roman house, Joseph accommodated himself with surprising ease to the many things new to him. The multifarious dishes and fish sauces, the diverse seasonings, confused him at first, but soon, by watching the antipathetic Dr. Licinus, who reclined on the banqueting couch opposite him, he had learned the most important points, and in half an hour he was rejecting any dish that did not appeal to him with the same haughty and languid movement of the head as the other, while, with a wave of his little finger, he beckoned to the slaves to bring him whatever he desired. Libanus himself ate very little. He complained about the diet which his accursed profession imposed upon him, extending, alas, to women as well, and he made a few wittily obscene observations on the ingenious devices which certain theater managers affixed to the bodies of their slave actors to keep them from throwing over the traces. But for hard cash, they sometimes agreed to free their poor actors for a single night from this obstructing mechanism so as to gratify certain high-placed ladies. Then, without transition, he began to sneer at some of his colleagues, supporters of a different style of acting, and at the absurdities of the traditional mode, the mask, the buskin. He leapt up and caricatured the actor Strathocles, strutting around the room so that his dressing gown billowed behind him. He was wearing sandals without heels, but lo, the high-heeled shoes and the whole inflated bearing of the actor were there almost physically before one's eyes. Joseph took the plunge and said, modestly but enthusiastically, how discreet and yet unmistakable Demetrius Libanus's allusions to the financier Reginus had been. The actor glanced up. "What?" he asked. "So that passage pleased you? I'm glad of that, for that part didn't get across as I had hoped." The ardent but modest Joseph described how the whole performance had moved him. He had seen millions of slaves. Now, for the first time, he had learned and felt what a slave was. The actor reached Joseph his beringed hand. It was a great encouragement to him, he said, that anyone who had just come from Judea should be so gripped by his acting. Joseph must describe in detail how each stroke had affected him. The actor listened reflectively, slowly munching a salad prescribed for his health. "You've just come from Judea, Dr. Joseph," Demetrius Libanus at last changed the subject. "Oh, my beloved Jews," he went on in a lamenting and resigned voice. "You're more bitter against me than all the others. People curse my name in the Hebrew synagogues simply because I employ the gifts that God has given me, and they use me as a bogey to frighten their children. Sometimes I see red, their narrowness makes me so furious. But when they have some affair to be settled at the Imperial court, they come running to me quickly enough to pour their troubles into my ear. Then Demetrius Libanus is good enough for them." "Good God," said young Antonius Marullus, "the Jews are always whining about something. Everybody knows that." "I forbid you to say such things," shouted the actor all at once, rising angrily to his feet. "I forbid you to say anything against the Jews in my house. I am a Jew." The blood had rushed to Antonius Marullus's face. He tried to smile and stammered apologies. Demetrius Libanus did not even listen to them. "Judea," he said. "Israel, Jerusalem. I've never been there. I've never seen the temple. But sometime I will go there and lead my lamb to the altar." His melancholy gray eyes gazed full of yearning out of his pale, slightly puffy face. "I can do better things than you've seen me doing yet," he turned to Joseph, suddenly important and mysterious. "I have an idea. If it comes off, then I can tell you I'll really deserve the title of the greatest actor of the age. I know quite well how it must be done. It's purely a matter of courage. Pray for me, my dear doctor, that I may be able to summon the courage to do it." Antonius Marullus put his arm familiarly and coaxingly around the actor's neck. "Do tell your idea, dear Demetrius," he said. "This is the third time you've mentioned it to us." But Demetrius Libanus remained obdurate. "The Empress also has been pressing me," he said, "to tell her my idea. I fancy she would give me a great deal to get me to carry it out," and he smiled with abysmal insolence. "But I don't intend to," he concluded. "Tell me something about Judea," he said, turning again to Joseph. Joseph told him of the Paschal Festival, of the Feast of Tabernacles, of the Day of Atonement, when the high priest for the one time in the year called upon Jehovah by his real name, and the whole people, hearing that great and awful name, cast themselves down before the invisible God, and 100,000 knees knelt on the floor of the temple. The actor listened with his eyes closed. "Yes, I shall hear the name sometime too," he said. "I have postponed my journey to Jerusalem from year to year. The working years of an actor are not many. He must not waste them. But sometime I shall take ship, and when I am old I shall buy a house and a little property near Jerusalem." While the actor spoke, Joseph had been rapidly reflecting that the man was in a receptive mood, just in the right state of mind for his purpose. "May I tell you something more about Judea, Demetrius Libanus?" he asked, and he told about his 3 innocent men. He thought of the brickworks, and the damp and cold underground cell, and the 3 skeletons, and his pain at not having been able to recognize his old teacher Nathan. The actor listened with his eyes closed, his brow resting on his hand. Joseph went on, and his story was vivid and moving. Everybody was silent when he had finished. Then Dr. Licinus of the Velia synagogue said, "Very interesting." But the actor rebuked him sharply. He desired to believe and to be carried away. Licinus defended himself. Was there any proof that the 3 men were really innocent? True, Dr. Joseph ben Matthias himself was honestly convinced of it, but why should the evidence of his witnesses be any better than the evidence brought forward by the governor Antonius Felix and found to be true by a Roman court? But Joseph kept his eyes fixed trustfully and earnestly on the actor, and simply replied, "Have a look at these 3 men yourself. They are in the brickworks at Tibur. Talk with them. If you believe in their guilt after that, not another word shall you hear from me about them." The actor walked up and down. His eyes were no longer weary. All his lassitude was gone. "That's an excellent idea," he exclaimed. "I am very glad, Dr. Joseph, that you came to see me. We shall go out to Tibur. I want to see these 3 innocent men of yours. I shall help them if I can, Dr. Joseph ben Matthias." He stood in front of Joseph. He was smaller than Joseph, but he seemed far taller. "Do you know," he said mysteriously, "this journey is not altogether unconnected with that idea of mine?" He was animated, lively, attended to the mixing bowl himself, and had something pleasant to say to everybody. The company drank a great deal. Later on, someone suggested a little gambling. They played with 4 ivory dice. Demetrius Libanus had an inspiration. Somewhere or other he must have some Jewish dice that he had kept since his childhood. They were very curious, with a sort of handle by which one could make them revolve like a top. Yes, Joseph knew of that kind of dice. They were sought for and found. The dice were rough-hewn and primitive, and they revolved in a pleasingly quaint way. The play went on with much good nature. The stakes were not high, but for Joseph they were enormous. He breathed freely after he had won the first 3 games. There were 4 dice in all. They were all inscribed with the letters Nun, Gamel, He, and Shin. Shin was the worst letter to turn up, Nun the luckiest. Strictly Orthodox Jews regarded this game as wicked. According to them, the letter Shin was an ancient emblem of the god Saturn, the letter Nun an emblem of the goddess Noga Ishtar, whom the Romans called Venus. After the dice were spun, they were flung each time into the middle of the table, and the players could select whichever of the 4 they preferred. In the course of play, Joseph turned up again and again the lucky letter Nun. Being keen-eyed, he presently recognized that it was one particular die that invariably turned up this letter. The reason seemed to be that this die was almost imperceptibly chipped at one corner. When Joseph saw this, his blood ran cold. If the others, too, noticed that it was the die with the chipped corner that had turned up all his Nuns, would not all that he had gained this evening, as well as the favor of this great man, be set at hazard? He became very cautious and lessened his stakes. What remained was sufficient enough for him to live henceforth in Rome without having to scrape. "Would you think it very forward of me, Demetrius Libanus," he asked when the game was finished, "if I begged you to give me this die as a keepsake?" The actor laughed. He roughly scratched his initials on the die. "When shall we go to see your 3 innocent men?" he asked Joseph. "In 5 days' time?" Joseph suggested hesitatingly. "The day after tomorrow," said the actor.